Hi everyone, I'm Tracy Lewis from We Are Winter Garden. Welcome to this week's episode of Straight Talk No BS with Matthew's Hope. One of the goals of this podcast is to have candid discussions about those experiencing homelessness in our communities. This week we are going to revisit an earlier episode which covers a topic we feel is very important to understand. I was joined by Pastor Scott, who is the founder, CEO, and president of Matthew's Hope, as well as Shelley Bradford, who is the vice president and executive director of Matthew's Hope. Pastor Scott, you briefly mentioned in a lot of the episodes about buying into the lie. What does that mean?
It's actually a few things, but most importantly, I think it is that many of these folks have been beaten down over time and have been told they're worthless, they're no good, I've literally had people suggest they take their own lives. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is people on social media saying that it'd be better off if they just took their own lives. And what happens is the human psyche starts to take that in and starts to believe in it. And when you're told you're no good often enough, you start to believe that. And the thing is then, I would say, because often it's the Christian community, and I'm one of them, that has been part of this. And you're kind of saying like, okay, so if we're made in God's image, then what exactly are we saying when we tell this other human being that they're worthless? But, the way we've been built and the way we receive that is can stop someone in their tracks, and nothing goes from there. And if that happened to start early in life, then many times that's where the growth stopped also. Because when somebody says to you, you're stupid, you can't do this, you can't do that, then that's what you become.
And who's responsible for creating this lie?
Well, it's a lie from the pit of hell. I mean, what I tell people all the time is, look, you don't have to be evil to be used by it. And we need to consider that. I think, we live in a society right now that we can no longer disagree with someone. Now someone has to be our enemy. And we need to get back to that place where you can say, well, I appreciate your opinion, but, I don't have a problem with people disagree with me. In fact, I encourage them to tell me not just why they agree, that they disagree with me, but why do you disagree with me? And normally I don't get anything from that. I used to tell my kids, I don't care what you believe as long as you can articulate it and understand why you believe it, not because some talking head on TV said so. Yeah. And again, we live in this society that we find news channels now that actually agree with our politics. Therefore, if that's all we're watching, then everybody must think just like I do.
Right.
Okay, and the same thing happens when you look at homelessness. It's we have decided ahead of time what we believe these people are, therefore they are, and that's just And I tell people all, like, if you want to judge me on my worst day, then you're probably right on who I am, if that's what you want to believe. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, some of these people have whether they created the problem themselves, because I have people say that all the time is, well, they brought it upon themselves. Okay, wow. Fair enough. You know what? That may be true. And so does that mean you're not redeemable? Does that mean you don't get a second chance? Does that mean you don't get God's grace because you did something stupid?
It doesn't mean.
And I would tell each one of those people, take a real hard look at that and then look where you came from.
Mm-hmm. Right. Shelley, what are the consequences of people believing this lie that others are telling or saying about them?
I kind of wanted to piggyback on that anyway, so that's a good question. It makes me sad when people don't just think, these are just people. This is somebody's child. This is somebody's dad. And so it makes people not see them as people. And how do I say that? I mean, it just makes people not realize they're people too. Yeah. And when they believe these lies that they've put in their head, they can think inhumane.
Yeah.
And I've seen that so many times.
It's like bullying almost.
Right.
It's like we teach our kids not to bully other kids, or we don't want our kids to be bullied, but yet as adults, they're bullying.
Right. And our kids see that.
That's just so sad.
It's kind of like, it's a great time to share this. I get a chance to speak at schools fairly often. Since the pandemic, it hasn't happened like it used to. But I always like it when I go in front of a young group and I'll ask the kids, I'll put pictures up and I'll say, tell me who's homeless and who was homeless and what happened. They see my picture and they go, well, that can't be, and then we start talking about that a little bit. But I say, tell me what you know about the homeless. And some of these kids, you figure they're in kindergarten, first grade, and they're saying, well, they're lazy, they're drunks.
Wow.
They're, and they name off all these things. They're dirty. They, first off, there's at 5, 6 years old, you have not yet developed the ability to make a judgment on something.
Right.
So they are simply repeating what they heard. And unfortunately, other adults simply repeat what they heard. We fight it every day as a homeless ministry. Someone said something, and it's like, did you bother asking if that was true?
Right.
Did you look into it? No, you just told somebody else, and it becomes their truth. And unfortunately, I've always liked it when they talk about they. Who the hell are they?
Right.
Okay, so whenever I'm talking with a group or what have you, say, well, they are doing this or they are doing that. It says, first off, what does that mean? They. First off, none of us we're individuals. So there may be someone in that group that is less than desirable to be around, but that's not they. And that's the part that I become indignant and a little pissed off about, quite honestly. Pastorally speaking, I become very pissed off about it because it really bothers me when I see the Christian community participating in this and churches participating in this. No, you can't park in my parking lot to pick homeless people up because what would it look like?
Wow.
I want to say to them, did you hear what you said?
Yeah.
Right.
No, they can't sleep here when it's dangerously cold because what would happen if people were to come in? Well, my favorite when pastors used to say to me sometimes, well, what if they were to come to church? And, I didn't go to seminary till I was in my 30s, so I was ready to take on hell with a water pistol in my late 30s, early 40s. I was ready to go. Let's go, man. I'm on God's team. Let's go. And when people would say this to me, I was just overwhelmed in a hurtful, ugly kind of way because I'm trying to keep my Christian facade. And part of me wanted to say, what the is wrong with you? Did you really just hear what came out of your mouth? So, and that's part of all the lie. And if it's happening in our churches, if it's happening in our Christian communities, then what hope do we have? Scripturally, it actually says we'll devour one another. We are the enemy. So when are we going to decide, and this is probably more of a rant than anybody wanted to hear, but when are we going to decide that we're not going to be the enemy? When are we going to decide that if as believers, if you don't believe, then what the hell? But if you're a believer, then shouldn't our lives look like that a little bit?
Yeah, it should. You would think that as a Christian, you'd have more grace and more.
Understand the grace that was given to you.
Yeah.
Once we forget where we came from, we're in trouble.
So does the term homeless person actually help to perpetuate this lie?
I hate the term. Now, I use it because people understand what I'm talking about, but that's usually why, I came up with this structurally challenged years ago. Some people are saying the unhoused. I think there's more to it than that. But the truth is that it's one thing to use it to try to have a conversation, but when we start grouping people in, just like any other group, there's white people that are bad. There's black people that are bad. There are brown people that are bad, but it's not part of they.
Right.
Okay, and it's the same thing. We talk about what a homeless person did. It's like, would we even mention homelessness in it for any other reason?
Right. Right. So why is it important to rehumanize the structurally challenged?
Boy, I tell you what, you're not going to have a chance to talk on this, are you? I get really passionate about this stuff, and I think it's really important that we take a role, and I will call out to my Christian community and say, it's time for us to step up and quit hiding behind some misunderstanding of Scripture and be the ones that sit there and get on our knee and look someone in the eye and say, what do you need today? Sometimes it's as simple as talking to somebody. I don't even ask what they need. How are you?
Yeah.
But look them in the eye and act like you actually freaking care what they answer you.
Instead of walking by and just,
It's life-changing for both of you.
It is. You might learn a little bit about yourself, and you might realize how blessed you are.
Right.
When you lay your head down in that 72-degree room that I do every night.
yeah.
I don't forget the nights I slept on the streets. And I almost wish everybody had to, at least once.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not talking about one of these things where let's all go sleep under the bridge together. I'm talking about being alone out there on the streets, not knowing where your next meal is coming from, not knowing if you can shut your eye for just a brief second. I mean, some of these folks are so exhausted because there's other homeless people. Sometimes they have to fear, but often that's not who they're fearing. They're feeling They're fearing Joe Public. They're fearing that high school kid now that thinks it's okay that when you pass a homeless person, you can clock him upside the head like it's some kind of video game.
And it's happened more than once.
Shelley, can you share any specific examples of people who have encountered being bought into this lie? That somebody has told them either they're not good enough or that they belong on the streets because of their choices, or...
I would even say most of our housing guests, that's where they start. That's because they just don't believe in themselves. And that, in helping them gain confidence and figure out who they are is sometimes hard.
Yeah.
But I would say most of our housing guests, that's where they start. Most of our guests, all of our guests, really. That's where they start.
And what's funny is how many of them have had success. They had the house, they had the business, they had the degree. They were successful athletes. They were successful this, that, or the other thing. But something happened there that created the wheels to fall off, and they just couldn't put the pieces back together. And a lot of our time is spent on trying to figure out how to hit the reset button, and encouraging them. If you talk to our guests often, and most of them would tear up the minute they try to speak about it, because it's a real struggle for them to come to terms with this whole idea that they are worth something, that they are God's child, that they are valued, that they bring something to the table. And it's kind of like when people ask about our Moving Forward program and different things. It really is all about building dignity and self-worth, because once that starts to happen, you can take on hell with a water pistol.
So breaking that cycle, Matthew's Hope is, what other ways is Matthew's Hope breaking that cycle so they stop believing that lie?
It's one step at a time. It really is one step at a time, working through figuring out who that person is, figuring out what they're passionate about, and then helping direct them towards working towards that, towards if it's schooling, if it's staying sober, whatever that is.
And then the services that you guys provide, I know, Pastor Scott, you've talked about just getting a haircut.
Yeah, I mean, the transformation you see in some of the men and women, and what's very interesting is how often they come out, especially that first time they've been in the hair salon, and they've seen themselves, and often it's like they're seeing someone for the first time they have not seen in years.
Right.
Okay. When a woman sits down and she has someone comb out their hair and get all the rats out of it and blow it out and stuff, and they walk out of here, and sometimes they're almost prancing. And if you say something, you say, like, God, you look fantastic. Often they smile, but the next thing that happens is the tears start flowing.
Right.
And we've had someone, I've talked about this before, we've had some say, the woman a few weeks ago that just said, I feel like a woman.
Wow.
And I talk about being homeless, but I cannot imagine being a woman and homeless. That to me, I've had enough women in my life to know that there's things you guys deal with that men don't have to deal with, that I cannot imagine living on the streets. And I would, maybe that's why 80% of our donors are female. Because I think females are more in touch with what that might feel like and look like, and the challenges they have, where men often get this idea, well, just buck it up.
Right.
Okay. But here's what's interesting, because we've all been told that, but if we're honest with ourselves, The minute say that, if we're honest with ourselves, often we would find that we're the ones also sitting there going, but I can't do this alone. But we're afraid to admit it because we don't want to show weakness.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be the hunters, the gatherers.
Right.
And the truth is sometimes life kicks your ass, and God designed us to be in community with one another. And that's not just when we show up Sunday morning in church.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that's a beautiful thing.
Right.
I highly recommend it. Love good worship music, but that's really not where it's happening.
So what can we do? What can I do? What can we do as a community to help break this cycle of lies and perception of the homeless?
I think partly be willing to be educated. I find that many people, they ask me a question, whether it's on social media or what have you. I give them what I believe is the correct answer, only for them to tell me how wrong I am.
They're trying to lead you down a road.
It's like, why'd you bother
So they
asking?
debate with you.
Yes.
And then I can typically back up any comment I make, and then I simply say to them, tell me, I want to learn. If you know something I don't know,
Right.
then tell me where you got that from. And I'll get things like, well, it's none of your business. You need to find it yourself.
Oh.
I'm going, okay.
Right.
I had someone say to Charlene the other day, well, Scott's story doesn't hold a candle to mine. I didn't know it was a competition.
Okay.
Holy cow, I wasn't beaten enough. I mean, what was the sexual abuse wasn't enough? The 9 marriages to my parents? I mean, what is it that, where were you trying to keep score? And the reality is, does any of that really matter? It's the real answer is, where do we go from here? And I think it's important that we really start to ask ourselves, what role are we playing in all this?
Yeah. So where does the money come from to help Matthew's Hope provide these services in the Moving Forward program?
Do you know?
I do.
Okay.
Donations from regular, average people just like you and I.
So like the government doesn't send you like a check every month and here you go.
No. Oh, absolutely not. And we are supported by some churches, but it's mainly, just the middle class.
I think most people would probably be shocked to know that less than 1.5% of our budget comes actually from churches.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Very small.
And we're talking, in Orange County last year was close to $6 million in that area. And now that we have Brevard, it's probably going to double this year. And that just fascinates me that, but really what it is it really is that average middle class person, maybe because they understand better than anybody else how easy it is to get there. I just was talking with a girl tonight and was talking to her a little bit, and she asked me just for a minute of my time. And I know this person, there's never such a thing as a minute of my time. But she's been someone on the side of helping people that has found them herself after divorce and her ex pushing her into selling the house. She's suddenly sitting there going, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? Where do you have a suggestion where I can park my car?
Wow.
That was her question tonight. She wasn't asking me anything. Where can I park my car that someone won't run me off so I can just sleep for a few hours?
Oh, wow.
Okay. And I'm sitting there trying to process coming in here, and I'm trying to process, okay, I have no answer for this person. A lot of people sleep on the turnpike. They do. We've actually paid toll money for people to sleep on the turnpike because it doesn't get questioned very often when people pull their car or truck or whatever, a van in to the turnpike and rest. That's common. So nobody thinks about it. But when you think about that, and I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm going in to do this podcast tonight, and I'm processing the back of my head, I really don't know what to tell her to do next, because the truth is you're going to be run off no matter where you go. And I get people saying not here, but at what point do you say, well, if not here, then where?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, you can't be here. Okay, great. We're going to trespass you. Fine. Well, but then what? And I think at some point we better, as a society here, especially in Florida, and I'm hoping people listen to us from all over the country, but in particular in Florida, you need to understand that Central Florida has the fastest growing homeless population in the country right now. And we're the third largest homeless population in the country. Okay, I've spent time in Seattle, Portland, Salt Lake City, New York, LA. Go ahead and keep ignoring it. Keep pretending like it's not there. And then what are you going to do when they're camping on the side of your road?
Right.
So we as a community
Those
need to come
homeless
together.
men, women, and children.
Wow.
I
Well,
feel a little fired up tonight.
I can tell.
well, it's important to get to educate.
Well, it's
That's
just
what we're here for.
it's painful.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I have to admit, I've told people I'm tired. My staff is tired. We have been killing ourselves now for the last 36 months between the pandemic and then going into this uncertain economy, you know, and people thinking that we have money. I don't know where they think it comes from, because we're able to do a lot. Well, I'm here to tell people we do a lot with a little. Okay. And if you pay attention to how you budget things and how you do things, I will tell you, my staff as a whole is right at poverty level.
Yep.
If they didn't have a spouse or a previous career or something else that helps them, they could not, like all of us, you have to have that other significant other contributing to the pot or what have you to even make it.
Yeah.
And so we're not getting rich doing this. And we get questioned all the time, why this, why that?
People think we're getting rich.
Yeah, I know.
I've heard it many
I
times.
saw someone the other day that made a comment about that every time someone dies, that we get money.
We get money. Where is it going?
Okay, and you know, yeah, and here's
I
the
would
really
like to
sad
know.
part is how many have we buried just in the last couple of weeks?
Right.
Okay, not only did we not get money, which was not expected, but I find it more horrifying that people died that didn't need to die.
Right.
You know, and some of it, one was murdered, another died from cancer. You know, I mean, there's all these different things that happen, and you know that you know, but because it's not the pretty people, because it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
It's them.
Right.
I can't keep going back to that. Oh, another homeless person died. That's terrible. Well, you haven't looked in their eyes then, because if you looked in their eyes, it becomes more than terrible.
Well, and they would have a name, not just a homeless person.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is straight talk, no BS. So we don't shy away from topics. And with that said, some in the community may question why a homeless ministry spends money on things like this podcast, a magazine, fundraising events, or even being a trustee of the Chamber of Commerce instead of spending money directly with the guests. Yeah. So why does Matthew's Hope spend money on marketing?
How do they expect us to build awareness? That how do we get out there if we are not doing these things? How do we get out there and educate people? And, you know, honestly, who is anybody else being asked this question? No, I don't see anybody else being asked this question that's a nonprofit.
I mean, the truth is, you know, Matthew's Hope is fighting for its life. Prior to the pandemic, we always had reserves. And here's the thing: we have not lost our support. Our donor base is larger than it's ever been, but the average donation is about half. A lot of the larger donations that we used to get, we aren't getting because, quite honestly, those folks, they have assets, not necessarily money, and their assets are tied up in, and right now a lot of things are just not moving in the market. And you throw that on top of growing by 500% over the pandemic, you know, we have to be telling our story because, you know, right now, literally, when you throw in the pandemic, the economy, how many natural disasters. You know, anybody else besides me send money to Hawaii? Okay, I mean, you see things out there and you want to address them, but chances are you can only cut that pie so many places. I've actually had some of our donors say, "Scott, I haven't forgotten you, but I really need to put some of this money over here right now."
Right.
And I get that. I do get that, but that's what we're up against. And if you're watching television at all right now, you'll see that all the big nonprofits, the big national nonprofits, are all advertising because they too are fighting for their lives. They just have bigger resources than we do to be able to tell the story. I can tell you that with our relationships with whether it's Imagine Marketing, whether it's We Are Winter Garden, whether it's with our various contractors we deal with, everyone is cutting us a break. Everybody's become a partner with us.
Yeah.
You know, from the build out here in Brevard to our expansion currently taking place in Winter Garden. We're expanding our medical and mental health care offices. That will be done in just probably the next 60 days. That's a big deal. But we have relationships with contractors that are jumping in there, like Heichel Plumbing, that just make sure it gets done. DPR, that half the material they give to us. We have these companies that have bought into what our philosophy is, and some of them have even hired some of our guests. So they see the value in these people, and it just again, I don't want to feel like I'm standing on the soapbox, but I think people really need to look at this from a new perspective and saying, Shelley and I sit down and we talk about the decisions we make every day and try to make the very best decisions we can. I'm not saying we always get it right, but we really spend time on making the right decisions, and we look at our relationships and we look at how we spend our money and what is our return on that. If there wasn't a return on it, we wouldn't do it. I would love to quit asking people for money. I would love to just be able to open envelopes because people were sending us checks. Right. Okay, but the truth of the matter is, if 14 years ago, if I didn't start telling people in what was then called the West Orange Times about Matthew's Hope and showing up at events and telling people the story, we wouldn't even be here today.
Right.
It's just bigger, and we've served over 10,000 people now. We're serving hundreds of people a day now. It just keeps going. It's big, but the truth is, Matthew's Hope exists for two things. It exists for two reasons: by the grace of God, and by the fact that God moves in people's hearts to be able to come alongside of us. And we're thankful for that.
If you would like to walk alongside Matthew's Hope on their journey, please go to matthewshopeministries.org, where you will find more information about how you can donate your time, talents, or treasures to help those in our communities experiencing homelessness.